All right, guys, we're back at you with another mobile hunting tips and tricks video. And today we're going to be talking about hunting tiny little trees using the saddle. Now, hunting little trees from the saddle is really no different than hunting a big tree. All the same climbing methods and all that applies. So if you watch my last video on how to climb a leaning tree that has those limbs on it, go back and watch that video. I go over how to use your lineman's belt to pass over limbs and safely climb up in the tree. Now, this tree is not going to be any different. This tree's got a lot of limbs in it. The only difference is it's a lot smaller. So why would you hunt a small little tree? Well, I'll tell you why you should hunt a small little tree, and that is because 99% of the hunters out there aren't going to hunt a tree this small. So the big benefit of mobile hunting and saddle hunting as well is hunting trees that nobody has ever hunted before. You know, over the past few years, I've really started to look for trees like this where, you know, people just overlook them. They're in spots where it's hard to get a tree stand in. You've got small, funky little trees with a lot of limbs in them. A lot of guys will just overlook those areas and not hunt them. I hunted a spot in the Michigan Public Land Challenge last year that was an absolutely awesome spot that was right beside the road. And the only trees to get in were shrubby little trees that were actually smaller than this one. And I was able to sneak in there, get set up, and I actually had 2 bucks in bow range. I just couldn't get a shot at them. So hunting tiny little trees, especially like this one that's in this fence row of this field, you know, it can offer you a big advantage in that a lot of times they've never been hunted before, and you can catch these deer completely by surprise. So what we've got here is a small little oak tree that's in this brushy fence line between 2 fields. Now, there's other trees along the edge of this field that I could possibly set up in that are bigger, but they've been hunted a lot over the years. They've got stands in them. The deer are used to somebody being on the edge of this field. So by moving out into this fence row, I'm hunting tiny little trees that these deer have never been hunted out of, so you can take them completely by surprise. So this little tree behind me right here is a little oak tree, and at the base, I can show you, it's about that big around, but when you get up to hunting height, I can almost put my 2 hands around it, it's so small. A couple things to consider when hunting a tree this small. A, make sure it can hold your weight first, obviously, but most trees this size, you're not gonna have any problem with. They're perfectly fine. Now, another thing is if it's a really calm evening, and I ran into this last year, I hunted this exact tree. It was a dead calm evening in the early season, and while I've got a lot of cover up there in the way of limbs and leaves and stuff like that, anytime I would shift my weight, the tree would want to move. So you may want to think about that. If you've got a really calm evening, you might want to stay away from a tree like this. But if you've got a little bit of a breeze or a little bit of wind, like I had in Michigan last year, you can hunt in a little tree like this, and the trees are all moving anyway, so you're not going to hurt yourself there. So another thing about hunting little small trees like this is you need really good cover. You need limbs, leaves, possibly trees right beside you like this one has to break up your outline and to give you adequate cover so you can position and get those shots that you need. Once the leaves start dropping, you know, closer to November, you're gonna have a lot harder time hunting a tree like this. So I would consider hunting a small little tree with a lot of cover, kind of an early season type deal whenever, you know, the tree still has leaves on it and you've got all that cover. Another thing when hunting little trees like this is I often don't get very high up in the tree. I'm only about 10 to 12 feet up in this tree, and I've got perfect cover and it works out just fine. So you don't always have to be 20, 25, 30 feet up in a tree. If you've got adequate cover, stay low. Your shot angles are a lot better, and it's honestly a lot more exciting when you have deer come into bow range because they're dang near eye level with you. So it's a lot of fun. I'm making these videos just to try to open your eyes, especially to the new mobile hunter. You know, you don't have to have a big, perfectly straight telephone pole-like tree that you would hunt out of, like with a climbing stand or something like that. So seek out these tiny little trees, crooked trees, trees with a lot of limbs in them, you know, trees that, you know, your average tree stand guy is gonna shy away from because they're too hard to get in or they're too small for a tree stand. A tree like this with a lot of limbs in it, you only need about 5 foot of open space between your platform and your tether. So if you have 5 foot of open space on that trunk, you know, in a 180-degree radius from where you would sit off of the tree, hopefully that makes sense, but you don't need a perfectly limbless tree all the way around at hunting height. If you've got a small hole that you can fit yourself into, and you've got roughly 5 foot of space from your feet to your tether, you can work with that, you can shoot from that. You just have to work around your limbs and be conscious of that. But you can hunt in a tree with a lot of limbs like this one and get away with it. You just have to find a small little hole that you can fit your platform in, and then enough room for you to obviously hang from the saddle. So I'm gonna show you this tree here. I'm gonna climb up in it, and then we're gonna show you how I would shoot out of it and how I would hunt out of this little tree. All right, guys, well, I'm set up in the tree. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully you can see me. So I've got that camera actually set up where the deer like to come out in the corner of this field. So as you can see, and I'll cut to a couple B-roll shots of me up in the tree so you can see what this looks like. But I've basically got a lot of holes that are roughly, a basketball to, multiple different size shooting lanes that I could shoot through right here. But I'm set up in this tree, and hopefully you can see it, but I would probably be kicked off back around here like this, probably waiting for the deer. So where I'm sitting at right now, these deer would come out roughly right at where the camera's at, and then back behind me, and I've got a couple real good shooting lanes right here. Now, when I hunted out of this tree last year, I had a couple deer filter out into the field right here behind me, and they were 12 yards away and had no idea that I was here. So as you can see, it's real calm still today, and I'm gonna shake this tree, and you can see how the leaves start to move. So keep that in mind. If you're gonna hunt a small little tree like this, you're preferably gonna want a day where you've got a little bit of wind, and that's really gonna help conceal your movement. But other than that, I mean, it's super simple. I mean, this tree, I can fit both of my hands around this tree where my tether's at. That's how small this thing is. But I've got a bunch of limbs in front of me. So besides right here where I'm sitting, I've got an open spot that's from my feet to right above my tether where there's no limbs. But as you go around the tree, I've got quite a few limbs here in my way, which actually helps break up my outline and give me a lot of cover. So I've got my little gearhead bow here with me. This is an awesome little bow for this type of situation where you've got a lot of limbs. So when it comes to shooting from a tree like this, it's no different than any other setup. I'm looking for just small little holes in the trees that I could shoot. I've got wide open shots right there. I've got wide open shots right here below me. If I bring the bow over my tether like this, I can pivot at the hips. And a lot of times what I like to do is take my offhand and run it through my tether, or through my bridge, sorry. And then I can easily shoot. Easily shoot like that. And I can also, do the stand-up trick where I stand up. I've got my shot back there. And I can stand up again and face away from the tree. And I've got an easy shot right here behind me. That'd have been a dead deer right there, hit right where I was aiming. So these tiny little trees are a lot of fun to hunt out of. I find myself hunting out of a lot of trees like this, especially on public land where you're trying to get away from other people and find places that other people aren't hunting. I oftentimes find myself in a spot where there's only little trees to hunt out of. So with the saddle, it makes it super easy. I mean, it's absolutely no problem at all to set up in a tree like this. So I just tell you guys to think out of the box a little bit. That's sometimes all it takes to fill your tag. Hunt trees that other people aren't hunting and spots that people are overlooking. And a lot of times that's where you find the deer at. So try to seek these kind of trees out, and with a little bit of practice, you can hunt out of tiny little trees like this and give yourself a great opportunity. So I hope that helps you guys. Remember to like and subscribe. There's going to be more coming your way. We'll see you again next time.